So good morning, everybody. My name is Dan Kraft, and on behalf of everyone at Forum Global, I'd like to offer you all a very warm welcome here to the 7th Annual Sub-Sahara Spectrum Management Conference. Now, having held the last 2 editions of this event virtually for obvious reasons, it's a great pleasure to be finally back here in person and to be able to see so many people here joining us in Cape Town for the 2 days of the event. It's already been a real opportunity to catch up with lots of people over the last couple of days, so it's been great to see so many familiar faces during the ITU workshop and at the speakers dinner last night, and I look forward to getting the chance to say hello to many more of you in person again during the course of the conference. So as I said, we are of course here for this event in the beautiful city of Cape Town, and I'd like to start today by just saying a huge thank you to our hosts here, ICASA. I think I mentioned at the dinner last night, we actually held the first ever edition of the Sub-Sahara Spectrum Conference in South Africa. That was held in Johannesburg. So as I said, it's great to be able to come back here, and in some way it feels like we're having the chance to bring the event back home. And right from the start, we've been made to feel extremely welcome by our hosts here in South Africa. And yeah, as I said, we're very grateful for that. And Cape Town really is a fantastic city as well. So I think myself and my colleagues have had the pleasure of having a couple of days here before the start of the conference and had the chance to experience some of the things that are on offer. And I very much recommend to everyone who's here in person to try and take a bit of time out to go and see a bit of the city, because it really is a fantastic city. So as well as welcome you all here in person, it's also my great pleasure to extend a very warm welcome to the more than 400 of you who are joining us for the event online via our virtual platform. Again, we're delighted to have all of you here with us as well, and look forward to connecting with you virtually and to having yourselves involved in the discussion via the various interactive tools that we have on the platform. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. So very shortly, I'm going to be able to open the event and pass to our opening speakers. But first of all, there are a couple of things that I just wanted to mention on the housekeeping side. So first of all, I'd like to say a big thank you to all our sponsor and partner organizations for their support of the event. So you can see, for those of you in the room, can see them on the screens, and for those of you who are watching online, you can see the logos for all of our sponsor and partner organizations on the screen next to me. Really do appreciate the support of each and every one of those. Without them, the event wouldn't be possible. So once again, thank you very much to all of you who have supported the event in that way. Next up, for those of you joining us online, I just wanted to very quickly talk a little bit about the virtual event platform that we're using for the event. So the platform for this hybrid event is identical to the one that we have used for any of the virtual events that you might have participated in over the last couple of years. So you'll be able to follow all of the sessions. If you're watching me now, then you've already found the area which is going to be available to you to watch all of the sessions. All of the sessions will be taking place on this main stage area. And you're also going to be able to access interactive areas of the platform. So if you look to the right-hand side of your screen, then you can see there's a Q&A area and a polls area. So we do encourage you, please, to get involved in the discussions, to post your questions, to post your comments in the discussions, and those will be passed to the moderators during each of the sessions. For those of you in the room, you, of course, can ask your questions and make your comments in the traditional way by raising your hand, and we'll have microphones to pass around in that way. We're also going to be using the polls tab. And again, for everyone here, we're going to be having an interactive voting session here as well. But I will talk about that more in a little bit in a second or two. Next up, Wi-Fi. For everyone here, there is complimentary Wi-Fi available throughout this building, and you can see the details for the network and the password again on the screen. So please do feel free to make use of that whilst you're here. When you are online, for those of you who use social media, we do have a hashtag. So it's the hashtag Sub-Sahara Spectrum. Again, you can see that on the screen. So anyone using Twitter, LinkedIn, or any other social media, or wanting to see what other people are saying about the event, please do use that hashtag there. And again, when you're online, you'll be able to access all of the presentations and the recordings for the sessions that are taking place today. You should have all received, everyone in the room should have received a card with some QR codes when you registered. Those QR codes, the top one I think it is the one that enables you to access all of the proceedings, and you can also find the QR code for that on your badges as well. So that'll enable you to access all of the recordings and the proceedings for the event as well. Finally, I wanted to mention translation. So the majority of this event will be happening in English, but we do have translation available for everyone in the room into French. So if anybody does need a headset or would like to have that translation, please raise your hand now, and we can pass that around to you. So there's one gentleman here at the front and over here as well. So we will pass those around. And if anyone needs translation over the course of the event, let us know. The guys at the back of the room will be happy to help and provide you with your headsets for that. Finally, before we get started, I just wanted to mention the networking reception that's going to be taking place following the conclusion of the event today. So we're very grateful to Broadcast Networks Europe, who are once again going to be hosting our networking reception for the event. So there is going to be a drinks reception, a chance to kind of continue the discussions that's taking place today over a few drinks at the end of the day. And that will be taking place just immediately outside the room, but we can show you where that's going to be after, at the end of the day. But please do make sure you're here and able to join us for that. So having said all that, I'd like to now open the conference and get things started with our opening keynote session. Now, we were going to be joined for this opening session by Her Excellency Minister Kombodzo Nshaveni, but unfortunately she has been delayed and she's instead going to be joining us a little bit later this morning. So we're looking forward to hearing from her later this morning. So instead, I'm delighted to welcome to the stage now to say a few words, Charlie Lewis, Acting Chairperson of ICASA. So Charlie, as I mentioned, we're really grateful to you and to all of the team for hosting us here in Cape Town and for making us feel so welcome. I know you're going to be back here tomorrow for your keynote presentation, so we are working you hard, I'm afraid. But for now, I'd like to invite you to the stage to say a few words and help us all to welcome everybody to the event. Charlie.
Thank you, Dan. And good morning, distinguished delegates, colleagues, friends, activists in the Spectrum environment. It just gives me great pleasure. I'm not going to say many words because I'm standing between you and a number of very interesting keynote presentations. Just on behalf of the Independent Communications Authority of South Africa, to welcome you all to the event this morning, just to indicate that we were delighted to be approached by Forum Global to host the event. Thank you also to the ITU and the ATU for their involvement in the event. Perhaps if I can just very quickly pick up, people talk a lot about the fourth industrial revolution, but it tends to be, I don't know whether tainted is the right word, but the metaphor that's often used in relation to the fourth industrial revolution is a second industrial revolution metaphor, which speaks about the role of ICT as the oil of the new economy. And perhaps if I can extend that antediluvian metaphor to look at Spectrum and see Spectrum as the oil of the ICT sector. So Spectrum is a key area of interest, a key area of activity for all of us in the room, but indeed for the sector, both in South Africa, but across the continent as a whole. And as we seek to bridge the digital divide, to roll out access to services and content to the people of this continent, the 500 million or so who currently still offline on the continent, there are enormous challenges that we face. A lot of that addressing of the digital divide is going to take place through mobile, through wireless communications, and Spectrum is therefore a critical area that we need to look at. So the opening session here is going to be looking at some of the challenges and some of the opportunities for Spectrum on the continent of Africa. So let me hand you back. Welcome again, everybody. Let me hand you back, I think it's to Dan, to kick off the opening session. Thank you very much.
So thank you very much once again to Charlie. And I think Charlie has welcomed everyone, but also has set the scene perfectly there. Because as he said, we are going to be looking in this opening session at some of the key Spectrum challenges, opportunities and targets for Africa when it comes to Spectrum. So we've set each of our opening keynote speakers a small task, as well as giving their opening presentation. We've asked them to give a few thoughts on these key topics and maybe to let us know what they see as the main challenges for Spectrum stakeholders across the region and what opportunities Spectrum can bring if it is harnessed in the right way. So we are going to be coming back and having a vote on that later and then having a panel on that. But as I said, each of our keynote speakers is going to be mentioning that and giving a few thoughts on that as well. So first of all, I would like to welcome to our stage virtually our first keynote speaker, and that's Mario Manovitz, Director of the Radio Communication Bureau at the ITU. So Mario, welcome. As ever, it's fantastic to have you with us. Charlie has mentioned yourselves as one of the key partners for the event, and yeah, as I think everybody knows, ITU have been a partner right from the start for this conference and for all of our various regional Spectrum events. So Mario, we really do appreciate the support that you and your team in Geneva provide, and also, of course, the team in the region here through Jean-Jacques, Jimmy and Billy, who've all been extremely helpful in helping and putting everything together with the event. So Mario, as I said, really do appreciate your time. I know how busy you are, and we're really grateful for you taking time out of your schedule to join us virtually for the event. And that said, I will pass the floor to you. So Mario, floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Dan. I hope you can hear me well. And thank you for the kind invitation to participate in this 7th Sub-Saharan Spectrum Management Conference. Let me start by acknowledging the Honorable Minister, although I understand that she's late and she'll be later there. But then the acting chairman of ICASA, the Secretary General of ATU, and all the participants and friends that are there in Cape Town. I would have loved to be with you today, and I'm sorry not to be able to join you personally. But as you might know, this week is the meeting of the Radio Relations Board here in Geneva. And being the executive secretary to the board, I have to attend the meeting here. So at least I can join you virtually, thanks to our, let's say, ICTs, and deliver some thoughts for you to consider throughout the conference. So if we can show the slides that I had prepared for this, please.
Oh, I was going to say, we're just having a few issues with slides, but we seem to have sorted that. So there's your slides now, Mario. Apologies for that, but there's your slides up now. So please, yeah, feel free to continue. Thank you.
Okay, no problem. So as you see, the topic is the one that Dan requested, the key spectrum challenges and opportunities for Africa. So if we move to the next slide, I will start by going straight into the challenge that we have at hand in Africa, and then I will move on to the WRC23 and end with the opportunities that the past conference brought to the region, and that the next conference will do as well. So regarding the challenge that we have, the main challenge in my view is clear. ITU's Global Connectivity Report shows that only 33% of Africa's population is using the internet. The rest of the population might either not have mobile broadband coverage or has other constraints, such as the price of the device, the cost of the service, or the lack of digital skills. So this is clearly the main challenge we have at hand in Africa, to connect the rest of the population. So next slide. If we look at the population that is offline, additional gaps emerge. The gender digital divide shows that there is a difference of 11 percentage points between the number of men and women using the internet. An even larger gap is shown in the urban and rural divide. While 50% of the population in urban areas are using the internet, this number goes down to only 15% in rural areas. The recent plenipotentiary conference that we had in Bucharest, Romania, addresses these challenges through several resolutions, of which I highlight the new strategic plan, the resolution on gender, and the resolution on the use of ICTs to bridge the digital divide. Next slide, please. Let me now turn to the next WRC. No, the previous one, please. Yeah. So let me now turn to the next WRC and the challenges and opportunities that it may bring. As you know, agenda item 1.5 is reviewing the spectrum use and spectrum needs of existing services in the frequency band 470 to 960 megahertz in Region 1. Next slide. The countries in Region 1 are very much divided as to what position to take here. So many countries advocate for no change in favor of the existing broadcasting service. Reasons include the high penetration of broadcasting services, low availability of fiber and cable out of the main centers, and the investments already made to migrate from analog to digital terrestrial television. Other countries that have widespread deployment of fiber and cable networks and rely more heavily on streaming devices would like to benefit of the high coverage of the UHF bands for the deployment of mobile services. Technical discussions are taking into account the Geneva 06 agreement, and the challenge, of course, is how to accommodate all the needs and how to coordinate among the various views of the various countries. Next slide. If we move on to agenda item 1.2, this considers the allocation to mobile service and the identification for AMT in several bands. Here, only 3 bands are applicable to Region 1, and I will detail them further in the following slides. So let's go to the first one. Band 1, as it is being called in the CPM text, refers to the 3.3 to 3.4 gigahertz band. As you can see illustrated here in the map, many countries in sub-Saharan Africa have already allocated the band to mobile services and identified the band to IMT through footnotes 5.429A and 5.429B. Sharing compatibility studies are developed with the incumbent services. However, I note that both footnotes already include conditions to protect radiolocation services, so this agenda item should not be an issue for Africa. Next slide. Moving on to bands 4 and 5 that also apply to Region 1, sharing on compatibility studies were carried out for fixed and fixed satellite services, as well as for space research service and space operation service. I understand there is much debate on the use of the upper and lower 6 GHz bands for licensed services, such as IMT, or for unlicensed services, such as Wi-Fi. Let me highlight that WRC-23 will focus specifically on the upper part of the band, and in doing so, it will consider the protection of existing services, such as fixed satellite services, as well as space research service and space operation services. Next slide. The last agenda item that I bring to your attention today is agenda item 1.3, which seeks a primary allocation of the 3.6 to the 3.8 gigahertz band for the mobile service. Next slide. In the C band, there are also 2 sides to be considered. Resolution 246 recognizes that for African countries, especially those in tropical areas, the operation of FSS systems are more reliable for use in C-band frequencies rather than in higher frequency bands. In the illustration, we can see that only 7 countries, which are all from Region 2, by the way, have identified the band for IMT. On the other hand, the resolution also considers that the band is already allocated to mobile services in Regions 2 and 3, and some administrations in Region 1 are already using the band for mobile services. In fact, there are 45 countries overall that are already using the band for IMT. Next slide. I will now move away from WRC-23 and look into other opportunities for the region. A first opportunity is related to FM broadcasting. As you know, the ITU, in collaboration with the African Telecommunication Union, launched in July 2019 a project aimed at the optimization of the Geneva 84 Plan for Africa. The idea was to address the increasing demand for new FM radio stations, to achieve an efficient and equitable use of the bands by analog sound broadcasting, as well as to facilitate the introduction of digital broadcasting by identifying new frequencies in this band. After 2 years of work, 3 frequency coordination meetings, and 32 interactions for compatibility analysis involving 53 countries, 87% of the submitted frequency assignments for FM were successfully coordinated. Following suit, most administrations launched the formal procedure for the successfully coordinated agreements to modify the Geneva 84 agreement in accordance with Article 4. I take this opportunity to strongly encourage the administrations that have not yet submitted their assignments not to lose this opportunity to do so, to safeguard the acquired assignments. This will ensure international recognition of your analog and digital sound broadcasting stations whenever you decide to deploy them. Next slide. A second opportunity lies in the broadcasting satellite service. Resolution 559 offered a one-time opportunity for countries having degraded resources in the BSS plan to regain a better reference situation. 45 administrations submitted the request to apply this special procedure. But they cannot stop there. These administrations would need to request WRC 23 to consider the inclusion of these assignments in the Appendix 30 and 30A plans as a replacement for its national assignments appearing in the plans today. Towards this end, the BR will deliver in December a series of workshops under the auspices of ATU and SADC to assist administrations to prepare Part B submissions under Resolution 559. And next slide is the third opportunity that regards fixed satellite services. Resolution 170 defines a special procedure to facilitate the process of entering the frequency assignments into the list with relaxed coordination criteria and to enhance equitable access to the FSS plan frequency bands for the member states wishing to provide service within their national territories. The resolution allows an administration to act on behalf of a group of named administrations, in which case the service area is limited to the national territories of the named administrations. Therefore, administrations could take advantage of Resolution 170 to develop and launch satellite systems as a group of countries for reasons of financial feasibility. And the next slide, it's a word of caution. The registration with the Radio Communication Bureau of frequency assignments for space radio communication services and their use does not provide any permanent priority for any individual country or group of countries and does not create an obstacle to the establishment of space systems by other countries. What does this mean? This means that other administrations continue to make filings in both planned and unplanned bands. And if African countries do not reply to the filings, they have the risk of having their resources degraded. In several procedures, no response means the administrations shall be regarded as unaffected. So this is very important for you to take into consideration. The ITU has developed a series of trainings and documents to assist you in this regard, but in case you need any further support, please feel free to contact us in the BR. Next slide. I have repeatedly said lately that Africa has advanced considerably in harmonizing their spectrum regulations throughout the continent. And as you have just seen, there are still plenty of opportunities for Africa to improve terrestrial and space services deriving from the results of both WRC 19 and the upcoming WRC 23. As Africa takes hold of these opportunities, do not hesitate to request the assistance of the Radio Communication Bureau to overcome the challenges that you may encounter along the way. We are always ready to help you. And the next slide is just a big thank you for your attention. Thank you very much.
Mario, thank you so much for that. And yeah, really appreciate you outlining in that way some of the challenges, some of the opportunities for the region, and of course, how ITU and the WRC process can assist and can help contribute to those. So Mario, we really do appreciate you taking your time out to join us today and for those thoughts. So once again, thank you very much to Mario Manovitz from the ITU. Thank you.
Thank you.
So next up, I would like to welcome to the stage our next keynote speaker, John Omo, Secretary General of ATU. So alongside ITU, ATU have been again a key partner of this event right from the start. And John, we really do appreciate all the support that yourself, Kezius, Alice, and all the team again give us. And yeah, it's fantastic to have you here with us in person to help us to open the conference with this keynote session. So I'd like to now pass the floor to John Omo, Secretary General of ATU. John.
get the laptop here? Or? Great. Good morning. Hi. I need your response. Thank you very much. I suspect that I'm a little taller than the speaker who was here before, who needed to use the assistance of who needed to use that, and so I'm on a higher band. Thank you very much, and thank you very much, my friend Mario, for getting into the details of some of the things that we will be discussing later today. I want to thank you for inviting me from Global and ICASA for the hospitality that we have enjoyed and continue to enjoy in South Africa anytime we are here through you, and also to the DTPS and of course the minister herself. We do hope to see her later today. I have some slides, but I want to perhaps get to the third slide, and then seek to the fourth one then. Okay, great. Thank you. I think the key challenge that faces spectrum management in Africa is encapsulated in this statement, which is that the demands of radio spectrum for various services and applications far outstrip the resources that are available, and hence what engineers do in their laboratories is to imagine that any innovation has a use out there. And so it is incumbent upon us to think how, after it gets out of the lab, it finds its applicability either as a system or an application. And we thank the good engineers for that. And so there has to be quite some delicate balancing and choices that are made in terms of the what, the why, and the how. Those systems and services will be allocated or assigned this resource for purposes of seeing them into the marketplace. And I think for me, this is the greatest challenge, which then is an economic challenge. What I realize lately as I get older is that then influences how people relate quite a bit. And relations between human beings is a political issue. And so I think the debate, whether economic, social, that we are involved in, takes a political dimension. And so I for the 3.5 years that I've been associated with this community, I then ask myself as an African whether the debates in terms of resource allocation, this resource allocation for Africa, are determined by Africans for Africa or forces that are outside of Africa, and that then becomes a political issue. Next slide. Getting to the, sorry, I seem to forget that I have control of this. And so I think getting the balances right in terms of usage is a critical issue. And as I've mentioned, various radio-based services, visible and invisible, requiring this resource. And we've got to balance the various interests and ensure that optimal allocation or assignment is made for the services that need this resource. There is also increasingly in Africa the issue of legacy networks or promoting innovation vis-a-vis stability. And innovation oftentimes means disruption of existing systems, existing plans. And so we are grappling with the issue of how then we need to ensure in our debates towards WRC 23 and even in past debates how we then secure existing networks vis-a-vis disruptions that come as a result of innovation. The next challenge that I see is in Africa increasingly is the issue of administrative pricing for spectrum. And I know we have varied views on this here, depending on the constituency that we represent. But I think oftentimes we see quite a bit of advanced scarcity fee, what I call advanced scarcity fee. That is, since the resource is scarce and then there are various demands for it, then you fix the fee in accordance with the scarcity and ask people to sort of bid for it. We've got to look at that in Africa, and this, for me, is a great challenge. We've just heard from Mario that we have large swathes of our continent and indeed our population that are still not served adequately, and we are looking forward to the use of radio spectrum as a lifeblood for connectivity. And so I think stimulating economic growth vis-a-vis advanced scarcity fee is one thing that we need to grapple with, and it's a great challenge in many of our countries. Most of our treasuries are going through hard times, and so an advanced scarcity fee is quite an incentive when treasuries look at opportunities for raising money, and so one has to balance that with the need to ensure that we use this resource to stimulate economic development and growth. And so how one fixes that fee or asks bidders to bid vis-a-vis the need to see that the costs of services as a result of this resource by various system operators is not so prohibitive as a way of recovering advanced spectrum fees paid for accessing this resource in advance. And so I think that in my interaction with most of our regulators, most of our governments, is a key challenge in this continent that we need to find a balance on. The other issue that I see, and I think we've had this debate from WRC 19, is the time value of the resource, the time value of the resource. There are allocations that have been made for certain of our services, and we just need to think through whether those allocations have been optimal, in the sense that in Africa and indeed in other jurisdictions, whether those allocations have been brought into use by way of assignments and actual use. And I think the non-usage of those allocations and assignments brings to the point that if you don't use the resource at that particular time or any particular time, then for that time the value to it is lost, not just to those systems operators, but to the economy as a whole. And I see increasingly some segments of the industry indicating that perhaps too large chunks have been allocated to certain of our services, and this need to review this. So I think that just like in other jurisdictions, is going to be a challenge as we move to WRC 23. The other thing that I see as a key challenge in our continent is of course, just like other jurisdictions, is what I call the transboundary nature of the resource. Of course, this need then for coordination, not just between various uses, but even countries. And the work that we do at the Union is essentially to bring our governments, our operators together so that there's coordination in terms of standards, in terms of recommendations, in terms of guidelines for the to ensure that there's no interference, there's coordination of the usage. And lastly, which I love, it looks like technical personnel became technical personnel. But I am happy that increasingly we have a body of younger people that are playing fairly actively in this space by way of generating ideas, by way of engaging in debate, by way of managing the resource. And I think it's something that whether you are in industry, whether you are in government, or in the civil society, we need to applaud and to develop. And that what comes with that too is the gender angle of this, that we need to ensure that even as we develop our capacity in terms of management of this resource in this continent, we also have a gender perspective to the issue. I am almost thinking that the room is not gender sensitive, as from my point of view, and we need to see Chairman Ikasa a lot more of a balance in this. We have very dynamic ladies in our organizations that, if developed, if nurtured, could very well be the leaders in this space. And so I see this as something that we need to grapple with as Africans and ensure that we develop not just our personnel in general, but also have a gender dimension in terms of technical expertise on this matter. I see someone laughing, but that's okay. In terms of opportunities, Mario has mentioned this quite a bit, and so I won't dwell on it. We are working actively in terms of our preparations for WRC 23. We've had 3 meetings. We have, various working streams going on, largely online. Our next preparatory meeting will be next year, which will be the last one. And we do hope that by that time we will have come to a consensus on, in terms of our asks at the conference, so that we present a common view. The implementation of 5G and emerging other radio technologies is, of course, a great opportunity. More so, taking into consideration what Mario had said, that we have large swaths of our continent that are still not reached, and we have fantastic opportunities in terms of emerging radio-based technologies to ensure that the areas that have not been adequately served or reached are reached. The short and medium targets, of course, we are working towards WRC as a team. We have a couple of recommendations and guidelines that we have worked with industry and with governments that we are working on to implement, and we are also working with governments, with regulators, and with some of you in the private sector to ensure that capacity building opportunities are available to our people, and of course with the ITU in this regard. And so we do hope that through that we can contribute to the development of a robust spectrum management in Africa. In terms of long-term targets, as I've mentioned, I think what we need to see a bit more is the right balance on allocation and usage, so that we optimize the usage of the resource in such a way that there's little, as much as possible, of any wastage. I think this should be my last. As I mentioned, and Mario and Charlie mentioned this, I think it's not lost to anyone that spectrum really is the lifeline or lifeblood of modern ICT as a whole, ICT ecosystem. And so adequate availability of the spectrum in appropriate bands is crucial for growth and for whatever services that we want to bring on board. Hence, all users of spectrum must be ready to work with everyone. Sometimes there's of course quite a lot of regulator bashing. I see that in many forums, but I think there's a sense in which we can dialogue without seeing them versus us, or that sort of framework. And I think dialogue, cooperation, understanding is what will bring out the very best of the usage of this resource for Africa. So thank you very much for listening to me. I still look forward to a robust engagement on these issues. Thank you.
So thank you very much to John for those words, and as I said before, thank you to Mario and to Charlie as well for their contribution. So we've heard from our three speakers so far on some of the challenges and opportunities for the region when it comes to spectrum, and in a second we're going to be having a panel where we're going to be hearing from some industry representatives and other key experts on those thoughts as well. But before we do that, we wanted to hear from all of you. I wanted to hear from you on the challenges and opportunities. So now it's your turn to get involved. Just before we do this, actually, one thing I wanted to actually do, I know we have Dr. Moshe Masonta here, who's going to be speaking in the next session. If I could invite Moshe to head over to our AV desk and to get mic'd up, ready for the next session, then that would be fantastic. But in the meantime, as I said, we now want to hear from all of you. So for those of you who are here in the room, what we want you to do is to invite you, as you can see on the screen, to take your laptop, tablet, or phone and go to slido.com. So we're going to be having some votes. We want to hear from all of you on a few key questions that we've identified regarding some of the challenges and opportunities. So please do take out your, as I said, tablet, phone, or iPad and go to slido.com. And then you'll see a place where you can put in a hashtag, and you want to put in the hashtag Sub-Sahara Spectrum. So if I could ask everyone to please do that now. For those of you who are online, you need to go to the right-hand side of your screen, and you'll see that there's a Q&A and there's a polls area there. You want to click on the polls tab, and that again in a second will be how you can cast your vote. So we want to hear your thoughts on some key issues that we've identified as possible challenges, possible opportunities, and to get some thoughts from you on these, which we're then going to be able to feed into to the discussion, which is going to take place on the panel in just a few minutes. So before we start with the questions on that, just to kind of warm everyone up and to make sure everyone is aware of how the system is working and what's happening with that, we do have a test question that we're going to run for you. So with us being here in Cape Town, we thought we'd find out from everyone what your favorite Cape Town landmark is. So we have some options here. Table Mountain, Lion's Head, Cape Point, the wineries, or the final option is for those of you who've never been to Cape Town, but of course would love to come. So as you can see, these are the questions that we have here. So hopefully using your app, you will have those options, and it enables you to make your vote now. As I said, we do want those of you in the room, please, to vote. Those of you watching at home, you should have that same question appear on the right-hand side of your screen. So please all place your vote now. And in a second, we'll see what everyone's favorite Cape Town landmark is. So if we can move to the results, then please. So we can see Table Mountain is the clear winner for everyone here. So hopefully those of you here who haven't been, chance to go up Table Mountain. So so that was a test question that we had. So we're now going to get started with the real question. So to run that part of the session, it's going to run exactly the same way, but I'd like to now welcome to the stage Hans Ihler from NERA, who's going to be hosting the questions here now, and also then moderating our panel. So Hans, over to you.
Okay, good morning, everyone. My name is Hans Ihler. I'm an associate director with NERA Economic Consulting, and I specialize in spectrum auctions and the economics of spectrum allocations and spectrum pricing. So this panel discussion here today is split into two parts. We're going to start with an interactive voting session where we'll ask your opinion on 4 key topics. And then I'm going to introduce the panel and we're going to go through the results and discuss. So that first question, we step. Can you hear me all? Yeah, okay. First question, what in your opinion is the biggest challenge that needs to be overcome in order to maximize the potential that spectrum can play in the region? Delays in making spectrum available, or delays in clearing bands, lack of roadmaps, regulatory certainty, impeding users' ability to plan ahead, prices for accessing spectrum too high, available spectrum not currently being used to its maximum capacity or efficiency, and last point here, balancing the needs of all spectrum users and getting the technology mix right. Cast your votes now. I think you've got 10 seconds. And we'll then move on to the results as they come in. Okay, still coming in. Let's give them another second. Okay. All right, let's move on to the next question. I think the results are still coming in. I think you're done now. Okay, we'll analyze those in detail later. Let's move to the next question. Second question, to what extent do you feel that there's the right balance across the region when it comes to spectrum being allocated on a licensed, unlicensed, and shared basis? Do you think the current balance is about right? Do you think more spectrum should be allocated on a licensed basis, or do you believe that more spectrum should be allocated on an unlicensed or shared basis? Okay. Still moving. All right, interesting. I think it's going to make for an interesting discussion later. Let's move on to the next question. This one is on spectrum pricing and allocation. So what do you believe should be the top priority for regulators when allocating spectrum? Should it be developing spectrum roadmaps or outlooks that enable spectrum users to plan ahead? Should it be designing transparent auction processes to enable the market to determine an efficient allocation? Should it be ensuring all existing mobile operators receive an adequate share of spectrum? Should it be promoting new entry and competition? Or just keeping spectrum prices low? Okay. Now, some may say all of them, but okay, good. Still moving a little bit. I think we've got a result here. Interesting. Very good. Let's move to the final question. Connecting the unconnected. Something we heard about earlier today from John and Mario. What do you see as the most important tool to improve coverage? Is it coverage obligations that are tied to spectrum licenses? Is it universal service fund? Is it competitive processes in which governments or regulators procure coverage in underserved areas, perhaps funded by spectrum auction proceeds? Or is it finding the right mix of technology, so satellite, mobile, others, and increased collaboration between them and different connectivity providers? Oh, okay. I think this will make some people in the room happy. Very good. Now, with that out of the way, I would like to bring our panelists here onto the stage, one by one. They'll all make some introductory remarks on what they believe are the key spectrum challenges and opportunities in Africa. And then we're going to go into a discussion where we go through the results that we've just seen, glimpses of. And yeah, that's the plan at least. So we'll start off with Ayman Moyaldin. She's Global Head of Spectrum and Standardization at Nokia. She's responsible for defining and executing Nokia's spectrum strategy and is leading Nokia's engagement on spectrum with all stakeholders. Ayman will give us her perspective on the key IMT issues as they relate to spectrum. Thank you. floor is yours.
Yes. Thank you very much. I'm glad and I'm honored to be here. And good morning to everyone in the room. We have heard this morning two distinguished speakers. First, we have heard Mr. Mario from the BR, from ITUR, and I have just noted, let's say, some percentage of connectivity in Africa. He was in his presentation, and I'm sorry if I haven't captured that all of it right. I have captured that 30% of the connectivity in Africa is and access to internet, which is a very, very low number standing here in 2022. So by so far, we know that mobile communication is the most used communication for connectivity in Africa, and we have some statistic about that one, and we know it, and we see it, and but there are also some challenges. There are some challenges to have this connectivity through the mobile because of the key part, which is the spectrum and the spectrum challenges. And we have heard from the distinguished ICASA counselor, Charles. He was saying that spectrum is the oil of the ICT. I would say spectrum is not only the oil, spectrum is the real estate. Is the real estate. We build the technology upon it. So if we cannot resolve the challenges we have in the spectrum, so how can we have an ICT, how we can have connectivity? So this is one of the things, and let me just, I have tried to gather and look at the statistic of the things, but I have as well to structure the things. We are, yes, of course, we at Nokia, we create technology that helps the world act together. Yes, we create it. We build the base stations, we build the connectivity, and the connectivity is how we act together, is how we, I'm right now standing in front of you and talk about that. But I'm going to concentrate on the challenges. And the challenges, if I look at, for example, the voting, I look at the voting, yes, there are challenges, but what are those the challenges? And of course, beyond every challenge, you have as well a kind of an opportunity, and we have to come over it, the challenge to get over it, the opportunity. There is a spectrum available, but is this the right spectrum that could respond to the need of Africa? What is the need of Africa? The need of Africa is, of course, to have the connectivity in a rural, in urban areas, in the places where you want to have the reach. For that purpose, you have to have the right spectrum and the sufficient amount of spectrum to such that way it's going to work on an affordable way. Because you could have the spectrum, it's going to be with a high price, as you have seen from the voting. And that when you have a high price, there will be no driver to develop the ecosystem for Africa. There will be no affordability of devices and to use the technology. Thus, we need to have spectrum that responds to the need. And for that one, for example, I could talk about lower bands, and I could talk about 3.3, as have been said in the morning, 3.3 up to 3.4, up to even to 3.8. This is a C-band. This is a kind of a resources that we need to have to build this urban connectivity in Africa. But also, coming along with availability of a spectrum, you have to refarm those spectrum bands. Without refarming those spectrum bands and make them ready to be used, it's not enough that we have them put into the papers. We need to see them right way and under the use, and we need to foster such a kind of things. We need to enable it. So we have to do a refarming, cleaning the spectrum bands, and above all, we have to think more how to harmonize those spectrum bands for the better use in Pan-Africa. Because if you have a band which is not suitable for the African needs, it has no value. It should match your value. It should match your needs. And this is what important things which we have to think about it. So we need to accelerate the spectrum, having the right amount of spectrum, sufficient amount of spectrum to have that ecosystem. Think about the mixing up of technologies. You have to have the right mix of the technology that uses those bands and applications, not only the technology, but as well the application. For example, if I took, for example, the 6 gigahertz band, we could have a right balance between the unlicensed, the authorization, the unlicensed and licensed. We have seen that in the voting, there was at least, I have seen more than 40%. They will look at that there is a need of a licensed spectrum. Yes, there is a need of a licensed spectrum because you will have a quality of service, you will have a guaranteed access. And this will drive the service provider to acquire that spectrum to build the network on it. So this is one let's say, one part. The other part is you could have the best base station, but if you don't have the backhaul, you don't have anything. And there are many sites. I have 1 minute to go. And there are many sites. Let me bring that one very quickly. There are many sites that you cannot have a fiber, and you have to think about what kind of an economical things. An economical things is to have the right backhauling with less cost. Price cost is also one of the things which is the Secretary General of ATU has said about it. Spectrum prices. Spectrum prices is a good thing to think about it. So you have all those challenges, but at the same time, you have an opportunity to resolve them. Think about the spectrum prices for a backhauling, for example, and you have maybe Africa, let's say in a statistic, is relatively having high costs for backhauling, specifically, for example, for the E-band. So the last point before my minute finish, which I think Dan is now looking at me, a dialogue. Dialogue is important. We need to have that dialogue, continuous dialogue. I would have to say that through the years, I have been interacting and working with ATU. I have seen a very good tool for this dialogue. We need to intensify this dialogue between us as a manufacturer, the policymakers who are here in the room and the administration, as well with the service provider and the MNOs. We have to have this dialogue, and through that dialogue, we can establish a cohesive strategy for Africa that could work for Africa, not working for other places, but we need to concentrate on the continent itself and the need of the continent. And with that, I would like to end my presentation, or it's not a presentation, it's just a thoughts. And thank you for that.
Thank you, Ayman. Thank you very much. Thank you, Ayman, for this. Our next panelist is Dr. Bienvenu Soglo, who is Director of Government Affairs at Intel. Bienvenu is responsible for developing policy strategies and advocating policies and regulations in the region on behalf of Intel. Please welcome to the stage Dr. Bienvenu Soglo.
Thank you very much. Okay, I think it's working now. Okay, great. Good morning, everyone. First, I would like to greet the acting chairperson of ICASA, also the Honorable Minister, even though she will join us a bit later. I'd also like to greet the ATU Secretary General, distinguished participants both physically and virtually. Good morning. My name is Bienvenu Apupunto Soglo. I'm the Director of Government Affairs for Africa, but I'm also our International Government Affairs CTO liaison at Intel Corporation. So I'll provide my contribution to this discussion through the theme of spectrum strategy for 5G, Wi-Fi 6E, and broadband connectivity in Africa. But first, well, at Intel, we have a purpose. And our purpose is to create world-changing technology that improves the lives of every person on the planet. And today, technology has never been more important to humanity. And there's an insatiable need for more computing, especially in the area where, for example, right now, the data that we are generating on this platform, the data that are generated in the retail stores, in transportation, and so on, they need to be moved, they need to be stored, and that needs to be done more securely. And when you look at how those kind of movement of data technologies are powered, semiconductor is at the heart of it. And this is being accelerated by what we call the superpowers. And as you can see on this slide, we have ubiquitous compute, right? Which means that we need computing as we move the data. The second superpower is pervasive connectivity, right? We're using connectivity right now, right? Wi-Fi, you need the 4G, the 5G, Wi-Fi 6E, and so on, and other technologies as well. Third superpower, we need the cloud to edge infrastructure. That means you bring the brain power from the data center all the way to the edge. We also need artificial intelligence to help us make sense of the data that are generated through those movements that are generated at the edge, plus another superpower that is sensing. Now, I'd like to put these slides up. Why? It's just to say, why is Intel actually talking about spectrum, right? As you can see here, our processors are in, different type of whether networks or, autonomous driving and so on, but focusing on the topic of today, you can look at the processes on 5G and then the client connectivity, Wi-Fi 6E. So we have, I would say, technologies across the board, and therefore we look at the need for spectrum from a kind of a holistic perspective. Now, having said that, as we've seen in previous presentation, we talk about the internet connectivity penetration on the continent, 31%, low compared to the world average. But that means that there is a lot of opportunities. Looking at the challenges means we have a lot of opportunities. And what I want to present on this slide is just to say, when we look at spectrum, and then when you look at connectivity, it has a socioeconomic benefit. And I think that is a very important aspect to look at. And so what you see on the left-hand side of the slide here is a study that was done in 2017, talking about the socioeconomic benefit of licensed 5G, 10.5 billion by 2026. But an important aspect is to look at the verticals, right? You see that those socioeconomic benefits are coming from manufacturing, energy, public safety, and so on, which are important use cases that needs to be enabled. When you look at the right-hand side of the slide here, you see a study that was conducted by the GSMA in 2018, and this is talking about the millimeter wave 5G. And it's saying that, well, by 2034, there will be around $5.2 billion in terms of 5G socioeconomic benefit. And as you can see also here, it is in several verticals: agriculture, mining, manufacturing, ICT and trade, and so on. And you can see, an important contribution comes from South Africa, at least according to this study, which is 31%. The third aspect I want to mention here is about licenses exempt, which is also very important in terms of connectivity. And as you can see below here, this is a study that was commissioned by the Wi-Fi Alliance that says, according to the A2R recommendation, in fact, that was published last year, and this study was done in 10 countries. It says if they open up the lower part of the 6 gigahertz band for license exempt use, the contribution to the economy will be 79 billion last year, and that will increase to 130 billion US dollars by 2025. That is in 10 African countries. So having said that, well, focusing on 5G, we've heard this a lot. We understand that it's different from previous generation, but one key element I want to mention here is that 5G is the convergence of wireless that has evolved over time with computing. And it has three key user scenarios or three key features that we all know: enhanced mobile broadband, right? Peak data rate, 20 gigabit per second, massive machine type communication. We're looking at million devices per square kilometers, ultra reliable and low latency. We're looking at latency less than 1 millisecond or so. There are many other target values, but I just mentioned those three. Now, this slide just to show what are the different use cases that you could enable by using 5G, right? For example, enhanced mobile broadband, that you could have a use case such as remote expert support. This is a reality, especially with the experience we had with COVID. And if you look at massive machine type communication, right? Smart cities, for example, one use cases. Ultra reliable low latency, using the drone for maintenance, for example. But one key aspect is to say that you have user scenarios, or you have use cases where you could use multiple of these user scenarios. And those use cases need to be experienced, need to be tested in different countries on the continent. So the second aspect I want to mention also is that looking at the use case of the Internet of Things, for example, not only 5G, but you also have license exam, for example, Wi-Fi 6E, that will also enable all of these use cases that you have here. Now, having said that, just on this slide, to summarize, it's just to say we need a diverse set of regulatory model, including in terms of spectrum strategy and roadmap. And there we need licensed spectrum, we need license exam spectrum. We also need shared license spectrum, as well as local area exclusive license, especially as we look at specific verticals, specific use cases, and so on. And so within the context of Africa, we need license spectrum in low band, mid band, and the millimeter wave band, as well as the need for license exam band, especially additional license exam spectrum in the 6 gigahertz band. I saw that I have 1 minute, but just using few more seconds, just to show that, yes, 5G has been deployed already on the continent, right? And this slide shows very well where it's been deployed, where it's been tested, where it's been piloted. And so more detail could be provided during our panel. And finally here, just to say in terms of license exam, yes, the lower part of the 6 gigahertz band is also being made available on the continent according to the ATUA recommendation, for example, in Kenya, for example, in Morocco, for example, in Mauritius, but also other countries are also looking at it as well. So thank you very much, and looking forward to your question. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Bienvenue. Our next speaker is joining us virtually, I believe. His name is Cecile Emile. Hello, Cecile, can you hear us?
I can hear you loud and clear. Can you hear me?
Excellent. Yes, we can. So Cecile is chair of the regulatory working group at the Global Satellite Operators Association. Cecile is also responsible for regulatory affairs for Europe, Africa, and Middle East at SES. And he will give us his perspective on the key spectrum issues and challenges as they relate to the satellite industry. Over to you, Cecile.
Thank you, and good morning, everyone. Good day to those who are online and maybe in a different time zone. Thank you to Forum Europe for inviting us to take the floor in this panel. Next slide, please. So I'm here in my capacity of chairman of the regulatory working group in the Global Satellite Operators Association. That association is made up of the most important and key players in the satellite sector, including SES, my company. Next slide, please. This panel is about something which, you know, is key to all countries in Africa and all countries in the world. Especially in Africa, it is significant because this is a continent where terrestrial type of connectivity, and notably fiber, is not as common, and cable is not as common as elsewhere in other parts of the world. So radio spectrum is definitely an essential asset to develop telecommunications and connectivity means in the continent. This slide is something which actually delivers a different message than some years ago, when we used to present the satellite industry as something quite monolithic. So it used to be very much geo, a little bit MEO, and that was about it. Now, really, the sector is going through major changes. New players are arriving, the competition is increasing, and as a result, we see a lot of innovation and also cost decreasing in satellite services. So it's now a multi-orbit landscape, which you can see. And what is interesting is to realize that when you talk to one operator or another, you don't necessarily choose or pick up one specific orbit, one specific technology. You can absolutely rely on a mix of them. So one single operator like my company can offer different orbital solutions, GEO and MEO in my case, others propose GEO and LEO. And there are also solutions which entirely rely on a specific orbit, like specifically GEO or specifically LEO. So you have a plurality now of offers and solutions. What is absolutely critical, and I hear a lot of that this morning, is that we need to work together with the other players. And here I'm talking about the bottom right of this slide, where we say we need to be integrated with the terrestrial networks. That is absolutely essential. This is what 5G is about. It is about our conversions and integration into the same ecosystem at the terrestrial sector. So we need to collaborate. Indeed, there is a need to rely on a mix of technologies. Next slide, please. So having said that, what does it mean in terms of spectrum? Well, I think we need to keep in mind that in Africa, maybe more than anywhere else in the world, there are many different challenges to deal with together. And that is really something not simple at all for the policymakers and the regulators. It is to actually provide meaningful connectivity and connect large areas which are simply not connected or poorly connected. And I hear a lot of that more and more when I'm talking to many landlocked countries, especially in Africa, where a lot of connectivity is missing for schools, for hospitals, for rural areas. So there is a need to expand meaningful connectivity. And that doesn't need necessarily to go through 5G immediately. Of course, first and foremost, you need to bring the essential services. Whether this is 5G or something else, that is not the point. The point is, how do you connect my hospital? How do you provide the right services which I need? How do you tailor the connectivity to exactly what I need in terms of agriculture, oil and gas, governmental needs? So instead of thinking in terms of technology, whether it's 5G, 4G, or in the future 6G, the real question we should all address, and we as satellite operators need to respond to, is what are the services you need? What exactly do you need to connect? What entity? What kind of service? So you have the trends for tomorrow's. We all go towards 5G, no doubt, but the path is very slow. And today, what is essential is to address these needs where fiber essentially is not accessible. Next slide, please. So specifically in terms of spectrum, I think there is a very important work that has been achieved by the African Telecom Union. There is a recommendation from last year, 2021, on emerging technologies that provide an overview of the various solutions which exist. And this is a remarkable work because, in this document, you have all the different trends which are essential and express precisely what all different technologies can contribute to connect Africa. We believe this document is key because you have recommendations, or let's say avenues that are presented in this document about how to proceed to facilitate the deployment of these technologies. And some of them are really about spectrum usage, but also the regulatory framework. Next slide, please. Now, I'm already in that stage of conclusion, but I think that is the core of this panel. It is about the spectrum strategy. Well, really, we are convinced in GSOA that it is essential to follow the guidelines, the recommendations, the conclusions of the various World Radio Communications conferences. When you look at what was achieved in 2019, there is a lot of spectrum that was identified for the IMT community. There were also great achievements made for the satellite sector in order to facilitate the deployment of ESIMs and next generation of VSAT solutions. On our way to WRC 23, there are several agenda items which are identified on these slides, which are absolutely relevant for the satellite sector. Some of them are really about facilitating further the deployment of solutions in GSO and non-GSO. Others are more about, hang on a minute, you have a lot of spectrum that is now available to IMT. Do you really need to go further and take more spectrum from the satellite sector? This is an important question. We all know that there is a lot of debate about that. I heard from Ayman that spectrum is the real estate. I hope that it doesn't mean that it's stone forever, right? We prefer in our sector talking about blood. Spectrum is the blood of our industry. And in fact, if you withdraw that blood, well, some part of the body are dying, simply that. So it's a challenge for the regulators. I appreciate that some countries want more spectrum for specific purposes for INT, and others understand also that satellite is absolutely vital. So there is a delicate balance, but that needs to be appreciated not as something which is enshrined in the marble or in the stone, but precisely as something which, you know, may have consequences on the long term. So spectrum is definitely an asset and an essential element which you need to preserve for the various technologies. Think mix of technologies and collaboration between the various players. Thank you.
Thank you, Cecile. I'm sure we'll come back to some of those issues later in our panel discussion. I'd now like to welcome our fourth and final panelist to the stage. His name is Dr. Moshi Masanta. There he is. Moshi is a senior researcher at South Africa's Council for Scientific and Industrial Research, where he's responsible for developing SIR's strategy for research, development, innovation for network systems and applications. So, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and good morning, ladies and gentlemen. As I've already been introduced, I'm with the CSIR, which is the Council for Scientific and Industrial Research. It's a leading scientific research organization in South Africa, where we are responsible for the development and the research of technologies with the aim of improving the capable state and also contributing to the socio-economic prosperity of the country. So specifically, we do have about 9 clusters, which ranges from agriculture, health, manufacturing, and a number of fields, defense. I'm specifically coming from the cluster which is called Next Generation Enterprises and Institutions, where we are looking into solutions regarding ICT and telecommunications. So my talk is mainly looking at how, at the higher level, addressing the questions which will be discussed by the panel without zooming specifically on one specific issue, but covering them over all around, as already highlighted. So it's important also to understand the local context when we address these African problems. So obviously, every country, we are member state, but we do have challenges which differ per country. So, and we are aware that the IC sector provides the key enabling tools for addressing the developmental outcomes, which includes education, health, business, and the impact of COVID-19. All of us, we know how ICT came on board to assist in that. In South Africa, we do have a National Development Plan 2030, which acknowledges that the efficient information infrastructure that promotes economic growth is crucial. But again, it has to be affordable at a very affordable price compared to other peers. So this plan, it helps or aims to contribute or to drive all the efforts within the country, which will lead towards ensuring that the country again meet specific targets. And here our focus, we are looking into the ICT. So in South Africa, again, our population resides, about a third of our population resides in sparsely populated areas, of which the cost of deploying and providing broadband internet to those areas, it becomes a bit higher compared to the urban areas. So operating in this context, it's important to understand how do we develop the solutions, especially looking into the bridging the digital divide between the urban and the rural areas. So Councillor Lewis spoke about the oil of the future, I mean of the ICT, but we know that Spectrum now, looking into the report by the World Economic Forum, indeed, they acknowledges that the spectrum is the oil of the wireless ecosystem. So it is important to make sure that there is spectrum which is released timely in order to unlock necessary investment into the infrastructure. Because through those investments, we are able to have the availability of appropriate services, which those services then are driven by the devices which are affordable. There was a talk about Mr. Jomo, who mentioned the need for affordable devices, because without taking care of this, the affordability of the devices, it may not help to keep on just raising the spectrum or deploying expensive technologies in those communities where devices may not be affordable. So I found this a diagram very important to say, for us to have the devices, the services, etc., the key is to release the spectrum. The key is to ensure that the adequate spectrum is timely released and serve its purpose. So our view to address the issues of spectrum is through the dynamic spectrum access and management. And this is the work that we are doing from the research perspective to say, okay, there are ways which has been working, like the traditional ways which have been working of managing the spectrum, which are more static, which are more exclusive, but there are some bands. We are not saying dynamic spectrum access may be applicable to all bands, but there are bands whereby dynamic spectrum access can allow the sharing of the spectrum, right? Because when we look at the advancements of the technology versus what is happening from the regulatory perspective, there's a gap. The pace of development and technology in the technology side or the research side moves faster than how the regulatory environment moves. So it's important to ensure that in order to address that gap, regulatory or administrators to collaborate with the private sector, with the like in our case, the CSIR is collaborating with the regulator to make sure that we do bring in technologies which are a bit advanced to start being tested, and we test the regulation, and that's how we move forward and ensure that we close the gap between the regulatory side and the technology side. So from South Africa, we have been working many years with the regulator when it comes to spectrum sharing and the dynamic use of spectrum, targeting mainly the TV white space or the TV band. We have developed solutions. We had worked with the regulator to develop to contribute towards the regulations of TV white space. Currently, we have got a number of projects, TV white space projects, which are addressing the digital divide in the rural areas. So we have got we run those projects with support of the SMMEs. So the drive is to ensure that while there are areas where other bigger players may not reach, how do we address that through the local SMMEs and the community networks? Then, yeah, okay, there's just 1 minute left. What we are also pleased is the effort by our policymaker. They've just published the draft policy on the next generation radio frequency spectrum. And what is in that policy? There's a support for the deployment of alternative infrastructure, such as the community networks. And we also were behind that. We believe that is a way to address the digital divide. And again, the release of spectrum for the community use in order to support community networks. That is also important. What we also would like to be considered is the release or setting aside some of the spectrum which can be used for the research and development, because it's through research and development that we'll be able to close that gap between the developed and the undeveloped communities. Again, we want to call for the member states, the AT already indicated, encourage members to participate, but there are a number of resolutions which are important, talks to the Open RAN. We believe that the work towards Open RAN is also going to address the issues of digital divide in the rural communities, as well as the use of community networks. So those resolutions which are there, we just came recently this year, are the ones that are of interest, which we believe that member states should take care of, should have those workshops, should build those capacities training to ensure there is an awareness and for the use of open radio access, and as well as complementary networks. So those are at the high level how I believe some of those questions can be addressed, starting from the national and as we go regional and international. And yes, thank you very much.
Thank you, Moshi. Thank you, Moshi. Please take a seat. All right, so we'll go straight into our discussion now. And I want to come back to something that John Ormond mentioned earlier. He coined the term the time value of spectrum, which is not something I've heard before, but I think the idea here is that the value of inefficient use or spectrum lying fallow can never be recovered. And I think with that, one should also bear in mind that there's a lot of growth behind all of this. So it means that if you keep using your spectrum inefficiently or letting it lie fallow, then the loss is going to compound. It's going to take you longer to catch up. So with that in mind, I would like to come back to our first question we asked earlier today. If you could bring up the results again, please. Okay, great. So looking at the results here, I think they do indicate, or they are in line with what John said earlier. And I'd like to perhaps ask Eamon to comment on the results and what you make of it.
The results are significant. 26%, so that the biggest challenge is not clearing the spectrum in a due time. Yes, this is true. If you have, okay, it's becoming now 27%. Is increasing.
As we continue talking about
yes,
it, yes.
Yes, I'm continuing talking. Is that delay is crucial since, because I have to tell it from the point is that when you have to develop an ecosystem, you have to have a calculations and things like how do you want to reach your goal in a certain point of time, and then starting the next generation of producing equipment and things like that. So you have the discussion, you have the WRC process, and through the WRC process, you try to harmonize the band, and then you have the 3G. I'm talking from an IMT perspective. Then you have 3GPP that specify the band and how they will work and things like that. But then when you come to reality, you have a location which is happening 10 years and they have not been cleaned from the legacy systems, and you want to deploy. And as an operator, if I just wanted to acquire that spectrum and it's not clear and I'm hesitant, I'm not going to invest. So that this is what Secretary General was saying about is the delay, the value of the delay. Whenever you have a delay, then you have a value decreation. Yeah, you're not, the value of the band is going to go down. So timely availability of a spectrum, and you have a roadmap. You have certainly a roadmap. WRC, I see it as a roadmap. In ATU, we have different task groups to discuss about the bands and how the bands should look like and what kind of technologies that they have to use. So you have this roadmap and you have the execution plan. So let's concentrate on that and clear the bands in a timely manner so that the society could benefit from it. The society could benefit with it, and in a timely manner and in affordable time. So you have to drive your ecosystem, and the driver for your ecosystem is always the spectrum. If you have the spectrum in the right time, then you will have the right ecosystem, then you will have an affordable devices, and this is a cycle. And I could mention one of the things, like, for example, I don't want to bring ICASA into trouble here, but they have didn't auction for a longer period of time, and then they auction it right now. So this is have make the market a little bit hesitant. So it's, if you want to have a healthy market, please auction in a due time. Thank you.
Thanks, Eamon. Would you like to comment on this, Bienvenue? And
Yes,
yeah.
yes, sure. And thank you very much, moderator. When I look at this result, I see a connection between the 19% and the 27%. Why? Because on the 19%, it's a lack of roadmap, regulatory certainty, right? And that's where we advocate to say, well, for countries, you need to have a broadband strategy or an ICT policy or something like that, right? A longer term one, within which you have a spectrum roadmap, right? If that is in place, that will inform the first one, right? We try and help and say, okay, delay in making spectrum available, right? At least you know which kind of spectrum is going to be made available. Now, when we look at the delay in the first one, what are the reasons for the delay? It could be maybe from the institution that is going to license the spectrum, but it could also be from the market, right? Because I think an important aspect that we need to look at is the economic benefit, socioeconomic benefit. If I'm an operator and I want to deploy, I want to make sure that I will have return on investment, right? And so those are other aspects to take into account, plus also the work that the institutions or the regulator also need to do to help the operators and ecosystem by providing opportunity for use cases to be tested, to see what will be the socioeconomic values of those spectrum that is going to be made available, and that will help those two aspects. So that's why I see a connection among both. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Any other comments from?
Yeah, no, I think from my side, the second highest, which is at 24%, I mean, I do agree with that to say sometimes the spectrum may be available, but the efficiency of its usage, you know, there have been studies which have shown that most of the spectrum that is being allocated or are made available, its usage is very low. So finding ways to efficiently utilize that spectrum, I think that will also be a way to address this challenge.
Okay. Yeah, we'll come to that, I think, with our second question later. Cecile, do you have any comments on? Yeah.
I believe the bottom of the poll, and I'm not sure I can read it correctly, but the last proposal, which is balancing the allocation of spectrum between the various technologies, I think there is 19%. Is that correct? I can't see it anymore on the screen. Yes.
Yeah, it's
right. So
19%.
balancing the needs of all spectrum users, getting the technology mix correct. I think that's probably one of the biggest challenges for a regulator, because obviously they need to arbitrate. This is where definitely they're beyond the administrative, delays and obstacles exist when you have to reform spectrum and make spectrum actually available. There is a fundamental question which goes back to all national regulators, and this is their prerogative. I think that's important to recognize that this is their prerogative beyond all the harmonization measures. It is precisely what is the right mix. How do you preserve that balance and make sure that the various technologies have adequate spectrum available to contribute to the ecosystem?
Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. Now to switch gears a little bit and come back to what Eamon said earlier about spectrum being the real estate of, I think, the ICT sector. Now, obviously, if we turn all the spectrum into real estate, we'll end up with gated communities. And, where am I, as an innovator, where am I going to take my toddler to play? So I would argue that we need playgrounds as well, not just gated communities. And I think that's something that Moshi touched on earlier with the dynamic spectrum access. and other sharing mechanisms, but also bienvenue. So I would like to come back to the question, our second question, and the results. If you could please bring them up on the screen. And so we asked the audience here that whether the balance is right between licensed, so the real estate, unlicensed, the playground, and the shared basis, which I don't know, running out of images here. But what we saw in the results is that the vast majority of 48% say that there should be more spectrum allocated on a license basis. But there's also 35% share who say that more spectrum should be allocated on an unlicensed or shared basis. So what do you make of these comments? Bienvenue, welcome to you first.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think when I look at the result again, I see a connection between the second one and the third one. Why? Because when you look at the data that was shared by the ITUR director, Mario, earlier, you see that, in fact, we see internet penetration is 31%, right, on the continent. There is coverage for around 80+%, I believe 81 or something around that. But then among that, only 31% is used. So you have 40-something+% where people are not using the internet. And then the question will come to say, okay, are those coverage, is it because, of the price for access, or because there's no other technology mix that is actually there that will help them to access the internet? And so also looking at the fixed infrastructure, for example, fiber is very, kind of not very pervasive or very much used on the continent. So deployment is needed, and therefore IMT or mobile networks are used. But at the other end, for example, we are in the conference room here, you could use IMT 4G or 5G as the backhaul, and here you have Wi-Fi that you use in the room. And therefore, you need a combination of both in order to make it work. So that's how I see this answer. Thank you.
But and you're absolutely right. I mean, only 17% say that the balance is about right. Yeah, Moshi, if you would like.
Yeah, it's interesting to see that very low percentage or few people believe the current balance is right. So you can tell that something has to change. So it's something has to change. Yes, allocation of license basis, I would agree with that. But how do we ensure that it's not like those who have the economic muscles, buying the spectrum but not addressing the real challenges on the ground? So balancing the license or exclusive license with a sharing license approach, I think that would address the challenge currently that we are having. Because if we only stick with the exclusive way of licensing without finding ways for sharing, it will just get back to that 17%.
Eamon, would you like to comment? I mean,
Yes.
didn't mean to pick on you with that
Yes.
introduction, but I think it's an important point.
It's an important, very important point, and a very clear indication. If you see that approximately 50% is saying that they see that more licensed spectrum is needed. More licensed spectrum means that more guaranteed quality of service, mean that you will have certainty in ecosystem. Means that you have an application which you wanted to use it, which is going to be in a license base, and you wanted to have it continuously using it. So this is a clear indication, in my opinion, when I say that almost 50% would like looking for more licensed spectrum to be allocated and assigned. And we have to look at the reasons behind it, and the reason behind it is that we have enough indoor spectrum. I wouldn't say we can work on it, because both of them are complementary. Those two regimes are complementary to each other, and those two technologies are complementary to each other. But currently, the way how people looked at it is clear from the voting. And here we are voting for Africa. I guess this is the discussion on Africa. So in Africa, there is a need to have those license bands and to flourish services and application. Thank you.
Okay, Ceci, is there anything you would like to add?
Not much, except that
Okay.
as a matter of principle, I obviously agree that having spectrum license is a guarantee of certainty, and it's important to all industry, especially in the satellite sector, when we have long-term investments. So clearly, yes, I would support the approach that licensed spectrum is essential. Having said that, we also have the fundamental issue of how to facilitate streamline licensing and make it simpler in order to actually facilitate the usage of that spectrum and at conditions which will not go down to increased costs for the services. But I mean, this is the regulatory paradigm. It's not specific to Africa. This is everywhere in the world, but we need to progress on that. We need to have, regulatory regimes and licensing regimes which are simpler and more favorable to the deployment of services.
Thank you. All right. Now I'd like to introduce the next topic. Mario this morning said that, or he mentioned that only 18% population in Africa don't have access to mobile broadband, and a staggering 49% do not use or do not connect to the internet in any way because it's just too expensive. Now, with that in mind, I'd like to come to go back to our fourth question on connecting the unconnected, and if you could please bring up the results on the screen. Great, thank you. So what we asked was what does the audience see as the most important tool to improve coverage? And here, the fourth answer, finding the right mix of technology, which is something that Cecile's mentioned in his presentation earlier, is a clear front runner. And that's why I would like to just come back to you, Cecile. What do you make of the results? Yeah.
It is the most fundamental issue, I believe, of all these discussions and debates. Clearly, I believe nobody can be against the principle that a mix of technologies is essential. The question is, when it goes down to how spectrum is being used, that is raising the key challenge and issue for a national regulator to find the right balance and decide how they're going to assign spectrum on the various technologies and make sure that some kind of balance is achieved. It's actually quite remarkable and not obviously not a good news that spectrum catalyzes the tensions between the industries, whereas in fact we collaborate more and more. So the reality of today's and let's say tomorrow's trends, and we see it more and more, is that satellite and terrestrial players increase their collaboration, and that is absolutely obvious and essential, because with such a large continent as Africa, and considering all the landlocked territories, you need to rely at least on these two technologies. And actually, I mean, obviously I'm partial in saying that, because when we talk about Wi-Fi and other technologies like HAPS, you can imagine a lot of other contributors. But I mean, I'm taking these two obviously as the ones which tend to fight for access to spectrum. At the end of the day, and this is more my personal opinion now, I'm convinced that we can satisfy the various industries, and that battle should be overcome. There is a way to satisfy spectrum needs for the various technologies at the end of the day. Obviously, there will be some, continuous tension. Some agenda items of WRC23 are the subject of, intense dispute. But at the end of the day, I'm absolutely convinced that there is enough spectrum for the various technologies, the various wireless technologies. And we should find a way to satisfy and go towards that mix of technologies that will enable, well, both connectivity in terms of throughput, quality, and reach. The reach element is so essential in Africa. So I hope, but I'm more than hoping, I'm convinced that we will find a way towards a collaboration, and we will go beyond that spectrum battle, let's say.
Right, thank you. Would you like to respond? We'll start with Ayman first, and then we'll come to you. Really.
So this is a very good question. It's important improving coverage. I've learned from Dr. Mohsin. He was saying that 1/3 of South Africa are in the rural. Definitely, it's not only South Africa. It's many of the Africans, they are living in the rural. And you have to provide connectivity to the rural. And this is bring me also to the point that we have to efficiently use those spectrum bands. And this brings the discussion on the sub 1 gigahertz. You have sub 1 gigahertz, you need to use it efficiently to provide as well connectivity to the rural, to serve these unserved areas. It's 1/3 here in South Africa, but I'm quite sure that South Africa is not only just one country in Africa, it's the biggest country in Africa. So if you replicate this one, that means, I would say, I will take the liberty and saying 1/3 of Africans are living in the rural. And that means I have to provide connectivity to the rural. And I have to use the spectrum efficiently. And the technology told us that to have coverage, and here we are talking about important to improve coverage, taking into consideration several aspects. For example, that fiber you cannot have the fiber coming everywhere, and knowing that mobile communication is a tool to do it. To have this coverage, I think we should have to use sub 1 gigahertz efficiently. And there is an agenda item 1.1 about the 470 up to 694. I don't want to preempt that discussion, but I think here this is one indication which we have to take it when we discuss agenda item 1.5, how to guarantee coverage and how to serve those 1/3 of Africa. Thank you.
Thanks. Before I come to you, Yamini, I mean, so it seems to me like we can bring down the 18% by a better technology mix and addressing it that way. We haven't addressed the 49% and the affordability issue. I mean, that seems to be an even bigger one than just pure connectivity. So maybe perhaps with that in mind, Yamini, if you could give us your thoughts.
Yes, I think this is a great question, and all the 4 points are actually very relevant, and it's a very challenging one. And as Ayman said, yes, low band spectrum, the spectrum below or around 1 gigahertz, 700 megahertz, 800 megahertz, and so on, and agenda item 1.5 will help in terms of coverage. But the question here, I believe, apart from that, the need to have the right mix of technology. It's also very important. Plus, what is going to be in terms of accessibility? I mean, and then accessibility, when we look at that, then the question will be, is the problem access to spectrum or access to technology, or is the problem, what is the proper, or what is the use case that people living under the coverage of having broadband access will be likely willing to pay? I think at the end of the day, in my view, it's about the socioeconomic benefit, the viability of the solution that is provided there, and if people there are willing to pay. If they are willing to pay, depending on the cost, then, right, they will be using it. Do they have the right use case? If I don't have the right use case, I won't use it. If I do, and I see that it's bringing a plus to my business, I will use it because I'm getting additional income. And so I think from that perspective, which is something that is not easy, but I think if we start thinking around that perspective and see, for example, you see here, we talk about Universal Service Fund, right? We talk about, the regulator doing a competitive process. So all of those actually comes into how do we contribute to that effort on allowing people to access broadband, but also making sure that is viable. That's what I have to add. Thank you.
And Moshe, would you like to comment as well?
Yeah, for me, I think it's more of the affordability, because the issues of spectrum, the 700 or sub gig part, it's there, can be utilized, and the mix of technology and the collaboration that is important is almost 36%. I agree with that. But affordability, once you bring that connectivity to the people, because now we do have people who have mobile phones who can communicate, but it's voice, it's 2G, where they do a second generation, where they do not have broadband internet, access to internet. How do we now bring a mix of technology? If, for example, we are going to phase out the 2G, which was more of basic communication, and now we bring the internet, what kind of solution are we bringing there? So that collaboration on different technologies is important.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Thank you. Now, I'd like to come to the final question that we asked. I think it was question 3 on the spectrum allocations.
It was question 4.
Oh,
Was there a question 4?
no, there was a. Oh, there we go.
All right.
On spectrum pricing allocation, we asked what should be the top priorities for regulators when allocating spectrum. And I remember Moshe in his presentation mentioned sort of spectrum. He's developing a comprehensive spectrum strategy, and that's what he's working on. So I'd like your comments on the results here, because that seems to be sort of what regulators in the region should be focused on. So with regards to spectrum pricing allocation, we asked, what should be the main priority? Should it be developing spectrum roadmaps or outlooks to give visibility? Is it designing transparent auction processes? Is it ensuring all existing mobile operators receive an adequate share of spectrum, promoting new entry and competition, or keeping spectrum prices low? I think the interesting point here is that keeping spectrum prices low does not seem to be a priority in the region. Whereas I'm sure if you asked this anywhere else in the world, it would come up fairly high up the agenda. And that's also with something that John mentioned earlier, obviously, where this is sort of the spectrum, I'm sure what it was, it's the scarcity pricing, where effectively a lot of spectrum is being held back, which means that when it comes to market, people are screaming for it, are desperate for it, so they're willing to pay high prices. Which then pushes price up. Even a competitive market price in this environment is going to be quite high. But our audience here does not seem to think that that is a concern in the region, whereas what they seem to be focused on primarily is planability. And so
my view
with that in mind, sorry,
my view here, I will agree with the 29% of the audience when it comes to promoting the new entry and competition. Because we have been having the players who are obviously having their business model, and the good thing with the new entrants is that they may bring new and innovative and cost-effective models that will ensure that they provide much needed broadband connectivity in those unconnected areas in the most cost-effective way. Because maybe it's just the need to change the business model to make it affordable to provide broadband access. When it comes to the roadmaps, yes, the maps and planning properly, being transparent on what will be required, that is also important. But I do believe competition and new entry, and that will also promote the local and the entrance to the market by the SMMEs. So
you're quite right. I actually, now that you say, it's 29%, so it's sort of a close call. We're sort of running out of time here, and I would like to give the opportunity to the floor to ask any questions to panelists. So if you have any burning questions you'd like to ask us now, then please raise your hand. There's one over there. And please state your name and your affiliation.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Mortimer Hope from Policy Impact Partners. We saw that over 80% of the population in sub-Saharan Africa is within the coverage area of a mobile broadband network. But just about 30% is using the internet. So you have just around 50% of the individuals that have coverage are not using it. And Dr. Masanto mentioned that it could be because of affordability issues. Shouldn't we be focusing more on making the service affordable for those who already have coverage instead of just chasing after additional coverage for the remaining 20%? I'm not saying that it's not important, but we already have coverage that it's not being used. How can we address that? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Would like to take this question. I think it sort of ties back into the fourth question we asked the audience and the promotion of competition, perhaps. So who would like to take this? Moshi, would you like to?
Absolutely. That is a good proposition, but we still don't want to leave anyone behind. You still need to connect to find solution to connect those who are not connected. So while addressing the issue of affordability to those who live closer to the coverage area, we cannot just turn a blind eye to those that whatever percentage, 20% or whatsoever, which is not connected. So solutions have to be found to address that, while again bringing down the cost of connectivity to those who are living closer. That's how I think we should look at it. We shouldn't just say, no, let's only put more effort into the ones which are living within the coverage but not finding it affordable. But we should, it's a balance to connect the unconnected and still get those who cannot access, to make it affordable for them to access.
Probably not mutually exclusive goals. Not a thought.
Yeah.
Very good. We've got a question here from the virtual audience as well.
Cecil.
Oh, Ceci. Oh, sorry. Apologies. Yes, Cecile, if you'd like to.
Thank you. No problem at all. I appreciate that I'm not in presence, unfortunately. One element which I'd like to add to this, obviously the question of affordability is critical, and we know that in our sector. That's something which we work hard on. But I think that discrepancy, that gap between coverage and actual usage, that is also raising a fundamental question of, is the connectivity which I'm bringing, does it actually respond to the exact needs of the people who are concerned about that usage gap? And the reason why I'm asking is because in some cases you need specific type of connectivity, whether for education or for health. There are situations where having state-of-the-art connectivity is not necessarily exactly what is needed, or the other way. I mean, I heard more and more from the regulators in Africa that having 3G connectivity is not enough to connect schools, for instance. So there is also that question of, is the connectivity which I'm bringing to the people adapted to their real needs? And the other point is digital literacy. I mean, are people really equipped? Do they really have all the know-how, and do they know how to best exploit the connectivity that is provided to them? So I think these other elements comes on top of the question of affordability.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right about that. Now, we've got, there's a question. Sorry. I'd like to give the virtual audience an opportunity to ask questions as well before we come to yours. So we have one here from Bashir Patel, who asks, given the technical limitation of 5G and propagation characteristics in mid-bands and also millimeter wave bands, why are vendors pushing for these bands? I think that's one for you, Edmund.
I wonder how Bashir was saying that 5G have propagation difficulties in the mid-bands. Maybe he had not yet followed the discussion which we have in ITUR 5D. And I guess that we are developing a technology and techniques that to overcome the challenges of the propagation conditions. And the propagation conditions in the mid-band are quite good. That if you compare them, and I will take a comparison, for example, between two bands. I'm going to take a comparison between the C band, the 3.5 gigahertz band, and the 6 gigahertz band. In our labs and in our discussion, we have compared both of them, and we have seen that the same performance and the same spectral efficiency which we can achieve in 3.5 gigahertz to have a citywide coverage is also going to be applicable in the 6 gigahertz. So in that sense, with the technology which we have developed, I say similar, I say with developing a technology like a MIMO technology and everything like that, we have come over and the challenges of the propagation conditions. So in that sense, and this is, you can, the one who are familiar with ITUR 5D sharing studies, they can take a look at it and they can see what kind of a performance that the base station that is working on the 6 gigahertz can provide a citywide coverage, and could have also be able to do a coverage in that sense. So in that, from that point, I'm quite confident that the technology advances in RF and in other things, that we are going well, and we are developing a technology that could serve the community and could provide as well the connectivity needs that is for the certain kind of an application and services. So this is maybe one part of the question. So
Thank you.
the propagation is not
Not as bad.
it's not as bad as people say, and we
I
have
shall
published
note, note that you have not really talked about millimeter wave. But with that in mind, I think I'm really sorry, Has. I would have loved to take the question, but Dan's pushing. So we're unfortunately out of time. I'd like to thank all the panelists again for their contributions. I hope you found this session useful, as we've covered a wide range of topics. And I think I'll hand to Dan.
Thank you. I have the mic. Thank you. Thank you, Hans, so much. And thank you to our panelists. And obviously Cecile, who's joined us just virtually as well. And thank you to all of you out there. And apologies, we had to cut that short with discussion. We could have continued that for a long time. But a really interesting session and a great way to kick the event off. So thank you all very much indeed. So we're now moving to a short break. So if I could ask you all to be back in here in the room at 11:30. We're then going to be moving on to our next session today, which is going to be looking at WRC 23. So a discussion around that. And also I'm reliably informed that the minister has now landed in Cape Town and is making her way over here. She had a few flight issues. I think the flight was delayed, but she is going to be here. So we're also having our keynote presentation from the minister after the break. So once again, thank you very much to Hans and to the panelists. As I said, back here, please, at 11:30. Thank you.